Thank you, Tom. My talk is about mapping antiquity a-la-carte, which is an initiative at the Ancient World Mapping Center in Chapel Hill. And we call it a GIS interface in the ancient world. It's not a separate program, this is a web interface. A little history behind the project. We've already mentioned the Barrington Atlas, which was published in 2000. And this was really on the threshold of map making. I mean, this was really, they used some modern GIS techniques, but it was mostly done with traditional methods. We in fact still have the light tables up in the mapping center. We use them to store like backpacks and put books on them, but they're still there. And it's fundamentally a paper product. It's a bound physical atlas, and its limitations are increasingly apparent in the digital age. It's, by its very nature, it's subjective. This is something that the cartographers have done. They've presented it to the public. You really can't change and influence it or really interact with it in a meaningful way. So there have been initiatives. Tom's already happily discussed Pleiades, so I'm not going to talk more about that. And the Pleiades network, which is what she just mentioned as well. But the focuses for these have been primarily for linked data or for the data backend. And what we've noticed is that there was a gap and there's a room to actually make something that's focused on visualization, on pedagogy, on actually making a map, like for example, the title of this panel. So let's talk about a map. For us, it's the a-la-carte program. You can see it at awc.unc.edu. We have links to it there. And for a-la-carte, our goals were basically to create an interactive, intuitive, manipulative map of the ancient world. We wanted something that anyone can use, that anyone can actually just fire up a web browser, go to it, and interact with it without learning some esoteric and complicated GIS mechanism. We want it to be useful for a broad range of people. We want researchers to be able to look at things to create maps which you would like. We'd like instructors to be able to say make map quizzes, everyone's favorite thing to do, right? And the general public as well to actually look at this. We want this to really be a way for people to interact with ancient geography in a way that makes sense to you individually. And we also, from the beginning, wanted to encourage the development of other digital projects with this data. And as Tom was just showing you, even on Pleiades, they still have a base map that is a modern geographic base map. And there's been some very spectacular changes in geography from the ancient world to today. So, and this is also something that will be useful, say, for orbits if you're looking at river systems as we think they exist in the ancient world, or as bays or water connections that are really different today than they were at the time. There's been a number of challenges for this, though. There's still some serious limitations in the software and the tools that we use. For instance, a lot of the mapping software you'll see, even Google Maps, still falls under some of the same traps of traditional cartography. They still limit what your choices are. They limit your languages. They limit how you can really interact with the basic map. And we wanted to get around that. We want to give you the ability to use change areas, move things, change your labeling, change your time, and make it so anyone can do this with the map. And that's been difficult. The tools we're using are open layers, GeoX, and these kind of things. And no one's really doing a lot of the manipulations that we want to do, so it's been kind of a challenge to do that. Another problem is the digital infrastructure. Well, we had a nice little incubator to make our map, then where do you put it when you're done with it? We were finally able to purchase our own server, but even then we'd love to have, say, the tiles and all this kind of thing be pushed out to the general public. We have just a nice little tiny server in a rack mount somewhere, so we need more infrastructure. And the need for more data. I mean, Pleiades, you have all of your places, you have your 30,000 places, but we want more stuff. We want to have the roads, we want to have, we want to have the general public or researchers be able to contribute things like, oh, maybe the river course is off, or maybe we need more data for some of our backgrounds. So what do we do here? Well, we think we've made an intuitive interface. It's open layers, it's GeoX, and this is pretty common. We've made it so it's customizable time, features, and scale. You can make a map from the archaic to late antique. In fact, we even have modern layers too, so you can see the changes in geography, plot things, which are pretty interesting. We have changeable languages and labeling. So you can make a map in ancient Greek, you can make it in Latin, English,
whatever language you want to use, actually. We have a gazetteer built into it, so again, you can make a map, print up a gazetteer, and download it and all this kind of thing. There's GIS functionality. You can do a lot of like manipulate objects. You can do measurements. You can do all kinds of interesting transformations. You can even make your own stuff on the map. So you're not even just limited by what we're doing or what Pleiades is doing. You can make all of your own things. And then from that, you can export that, and I'll show you that functionality in a minute. And you can export it into many different formats, into CSV files, JSON files, KML. You can even download to your own computer and upload it later to either your colleagues or yourself to actually manipulate the map. And from the beginning, we've linked with both Pleiades and Plagios. We're all one big circular family at this point, I think, so we want to keep it that way. And we wanted to make an API and options for linking to completed maps, or being able, if you have a project, to link to a-la-carte or to make an ancient map without really using too many resources on your own end. So, with that, let's just look at a-la-carte for a second, which is right here. So this is the base map. You can see we cover a pretty large section of the Mediterranean world. Then you can zoom out and see just really what our coverage is. And these blank areas are just areas we haven't actually uploaded. There's really nothing there anyway. So if you want to map somewhere in the North Pole, go right ahead. We can't do it with our system, sorry. We can see right here, we'll put on the static features. This is our entire data set, which, while neat, is probably not all that useful to people. And I'll show you some other things in a second. You can look at it. We have a large road network system. We have aqueducts. We have urban areas, which you can't see at the scale. We also have, say, political areas. If you're interested in the Roman Empire, there you go. You can look at the Alexander, Persian Empire. If you have more data, we're willing to take it and put it up here. So, what can you do with this thing? Well, we can search for features. So if we were going to look for, let's just say, forts, you can just search for that. And that'll actually pull everything from our database. This is, again, based on Pleiades. And you can add them all at the same time if you want. And I give a little warning here because OpenLayers does have a limit as to how many places you can put on at once before your local machine starts to cry. But we're going to continue anyway because we're furious. And there you go. Now, that's all the fortresses. And then from there, let's just, we can label them. Well, let's just number them all. And you'll see all the different numbers and all that. So if you're making, say, a quiz or something, and you want to set up your map, you can search for different places, make your map, label it as a quiz, and then you can even print it, which that will generate a PDF file, and then there you go. You can also, you can export it, again, as a CSV file, as JSON, or as KML, and you can even do this thing that well, you're not going to be able to do it here, it's too much, a map URL. So if you go, an example for that is here, where I made just a little map of, say, a program on some surrounding areas, and you can see it generates this URL for you, which then, if anyone clicks on it, will take you to a map with what you have, with your zoom level, where you're at, everything that you want to put on. So if you have, say, a project and you don't want to learn JavaScript, or you can't use JavaScript or something like that, you can build a map here and just do this direct link. And this is something that we'd like to actually push out for other projects and people who are interested in showing maps for more complicated linking that's not just this URL. Because again, if you have like 1,000 places, you can't put an 11-page URL into your taskbar. I've tried, it doesn't work. Now, things you could do here, let's just take Pergamon. You click on it, and it'll give you a nice little pop-up with information. Any names that we have it in Greek, and we have just Pergamon. If you go to explore further, you can go to your Pleiades page. So this will bring up Pleiades if it loads. And while we're waiting for that, you could even go to, say, Plagios, and this will go to their LinkedIn network, giving you everyone that has Pergamon, so you can explore these places further. If you want to edit the information, let's turn this thing into a whirlpool, why not? And there you go. You can see that it's now the whirlpool of Pergamon. You can even search geographic areas. So let's just draw a nice little search area here. and say, well, what's in this little island, what's in this island area? Then I will give you what's in there, and then you can further refine it to, well, I'm only really interested in an island, and you can see that it keeps your nice little geometry there. Then you go to search, and it'll just tell you, well, there's the island there. So there you are in the map. And again, when you're all done with it, you can just say, well, what's my map URL? Paste that, and there you go. Now, you can also have the gazetteer I mentioned earlier, which you can export as a CSV file. So again, you can make a map, you can make a key that goes along with it. You can have several different documents, whatever you want to do there. Now, along with that, we've also created an API. So this gives you access to all of the geographic data that we are producing at the Ancient World Mapping Center. And just to show you an example for it, let's just say Rome, and we're interested in the urban footprint of Rome. So you can search for that. Well, you got one hit, because everything's linked again to the Pleiades ID. And if you go there, well, it gives you the geometry for the urban footprint of Rome. And this is a stable URI, so you can actually link directly to it. You can link to it in a GeoJSON format, which is used directly in open layers. So you can actually, if you're doing your own application and you know the Pleiades IDs, you can go through, grab it from our system, and get geometry for rivers, for urban areas, for whatever you're really interested in. It's also available in RDF as well, and again links to Pleiades and Plagios, and gives you human readable JSON if you really want to see all the different geographic points. And then a-la-carte is really, as we see it, the beginning of the initiatives that we're doing. And let me just return to our slides here, which I've kind of gone off for a little bit. We'll just talk about that. But what we want to do now is we're taking the a-la-carte code base and we're expanding into different areas. One thing that we just released in a beta version is called Benthos, which is a digital atlas of ancient waters. And what we're looking at here are shipwrecks, cargoes, cargo locations, connections, networks, this kind of thing. And we'd love to use some of the work that Orbis has been doing, and we'd love to complicate the work that they're doing as well. By showing, say, different shipwrecks, we can maybe influence how these networks are actually constructed. And again, it's based on a-la-carte, it's in the beta stage. And this, for instance, here's the wreck at Gela. And you can see we have this is all based right now on Parker, and we're trying to, who made an inventory of wrecks in 1992. And we're trying to set up a system similar to Pleiades that will be a referee space where people can contribute to this. They can add like recs, data, pictures, this kind of thing. One concern is we have to make sure that our information is actually not all that accurate, because we don't want someone to take our system, go to a wreck, dive down and destroy it. So while we'd like to have accurate information, we're not going to give people extremely precise coordinates for wrecks. I mean, if you really want to get within like 30 miles of the wreck and buy a side somewhere, we can't stop you. You could probably read that in the journal anyway. But that's something we have to be aware of. And then from here, if you did something like click on our map cargo, for instance, this rec then shows you where the origin of the cargoes that we know about are from. And this is going to be a pretty large undertaking, because there's a lot of amphora, there's a lot of amphora that are just types that we have no idea really where they're from. So by its very nature, this will be a very selective kind of thing, but similar to Pleiades, we'd like more and more people to get involved and contribute to it. We are also doing a Asia Minor wall map, and it is almost done, which has been a 3-year undertaking. And we've again used the a-la-carte code base to actually make a reviewer model of this thing, so that we can show reviewers what the map is, how it's constructed, and they can comment on it all in our database, make changes back and forth. We're pretty excited about that, which is really, I think, a step forward in map making. That instead of, say, the traditional method, which is you send the paper, they send it back covered in sticky notes, slightly, sometimes illegible writing in lots of red circles, we can just do it all through our database now and through our web interface, which is, I think, a step in the right direction. We are also going to be, again, using the a-la-carte code base for mapping Strable's geography, which is from Dwayne Roller's complete English translation that's coming out from the Cambridge University Press. We're to make about 60 pages of traditional maps for this project, plus put everything into, again, a linked environment online that you can access. And as part of that, one thing that I'd like to do is try to make a background like we have for a-la-carte, and just morph it into how Strabo actually looked at a background. So we can have, say, SRTM data that's been distorted, if you want to think of it that way, to actually reflect an ancient view of the Mediterranean basin. We're also planning to do this for money, and we're starting to look into doing this for Roman milestones as well. Again, using the a-la-carte base, getting Roman milestones to plot, well, in situ where we know they are, find spots, and then put on, say, an interface where you could look at the Latin, where you could look at the inscriptions and everything as well. And then finally, we're looking into the Forma Urbis Roma to actually make a web map for this that is stitched together for the first time, see the entire thing, have it all linked up, where you can actually manipulate the pieces. It's a giant urban marble plan of Rome, and then you can just kind of manipulate it, see where the fragments might go, contribute to that. And so we're pretty excited about the possibility for that as well. And with that, I would like to call Tom back up, and we'll talk a little bit about how we actually link up between the Pleiades and the ancient world maps.
Yes, I think we have 4 minutes left, so Greg's already gone. Yeah, so here's my weebles again. We've just kind of talked about this business. One of the things Ryan didn't say is that we're working out the process of being able to bring stuff nightly, or whatever they want to. The mapping center is able to pull from Pleiades, so you get what the broad community of Pleiades users and editors have said is good new stuff. And we want that to be a reciprocal thing. So when work is done in the mapping center on a particular project, say Strabo or whatever it is, that flows back automatically into Pleiades as well. So that the whole community is benefiting from the whole community's work more or less simultaneously. There's also this much bigger graph of interaction that's grown and growing around ancient geography. And I really want to emphasize this to encourage all of you to join the collective. And this is largely the work of the web as a whole, as an organism of people working together. We have a couple of projects like Orbis and Regnum Francorum Online, which does quasi what Aedo-Vinci and Pleiades are doing for the ancient world for Merovingian and Carolingian periods and spaces. And that data is all collated, so you can get from Pleiades to RFO, you can get from RFO back to Pleiades, but there are a number of other resources that our weebles in the middle, I mean people, are making use of and contributing to, and we'd like all this stuff to cohere. Right? You will probably recognize some of the acronyms in here, but not all of them. I'm happy to unpack any of them for you you'd like to have unpacked. I mentioned ancient Near Eastern geography. That's what's coming in from old Tableau data through a project called the Geographic, or the Gazetteer of the Ancient Near East, but we'll skip that. What I do want to point out is Pelagius. So what Pelagius did is they said, let's take these Pleiades identifiers that the mapping center and Pleiades itself is using. Let's use a little bit of this linked data, this resource description framework, RDF, and have everybody say in that format, here's what I've got that's related to those places. And these are all the projects that are online now that are doing it. Perseus, Arachne, the Portable Antiquity Scheme, Claros, which bundles together a bunch of stuff from European museums and the Beasley Archive, SquinchPix, Omnes VI, which is a cool site that took Richard Talbert's work on the Poitiers map and put it online where you can play with it. A Book of the Dead project, on and on and on, and more coming, including the British Museum's classical collections, will all be part of this network with an open API and open data around it that your site, your project can dip into and find out, so long as you know the magic identifier, what's related to the place you're working on. This is the graph we're trying to grow. We're interested in seeing where the edges will begin to touch other things, like prosopography. texts are already part of the Pleiades universe, we need to start thinking about how we expose that, both for us to harvest and for us to contribute to. Because we use text in a very specific way. We want our name resources to indicate the attestations. We want to point at the witnesses. And we would prefer not to let a new ancient name into the data set now without having that attribution attached. So nobody has to do it again. Ryan, do you want to? I think that's it. Oh yeah, so these are just about data flows back into Pleiades here and back out. I should say, I want to point out too, Openstreetmap. Really amazing project that if you're at all interested in geography, you want to take a look at. In many cases, there are parts of the world that are much better mapped by OpenStreetMap and its collaborative open team than you will find in any of the paid resources you can buy. Other places where that's flipped. But one of the things we recently started doing with Pleiades is making it much easier for you to point at an item already in OpenStreetMap and say, I want to bring that into an ancient context. It will go ahead and copy it, make a clear attribution that's immediately both in our display and in the linked data, and thereafter Pleiades and OSM go forward together on that information. So where OpenStreetMap and people have seen an existing piece of archaeology in the landscape, you can match it up. The graph is here, right? If you have been listening to people talk about the semantic web and linked data and the social graph, it's not just Vapor and Facebook anymore. The graph is here, we can make this stuff work, and it makes it possible for Pleiades users to know that there's this increasing batch of information right out here that's potentially relevant to the place they're looking at, and anybody else can tap into that set of networks and reuse it. So,
And just as an example of that,
yeah.
This is just a really primitive data flow that I cooked up, which was even before that we started actually trying to get this system back and forth. And this is just grabbing Pleiades data and updating our database. Simple PHP script. And we'll see if the demo daemons get us or not. Which downloads Pleiades data dumps, which Thomas mentioned before, and just associates them with our database and adds anything new or updates as necessary.
Yeah. So what this is doing is it's grabbing our big comma-separated value file dump that was done last night or 2 in the morning, whatever it was, and collating it against the data they already have in the database to see what's new or changed. Did it work?
Yep, nothing blew up. And so what I did is just say, well, here's what we are really interested in. Pleiades, as you can see, has a lot more. And then it just gives us a little summary. And if something actually blows up on here, we get the Pleiades ID, and then I can contact Tom and say, well, it looks like Pleiades, like 923 or whatever, has an extra character and blows up on other people's systems. So we're able to catch it that way. And again, going back to...
I should say, this is one of the advantages of doing things in this collaborative networked way. He's checking my data.
Yep.
For free.
Yeah, it's great. And that's one of the things, too, if we go back to a-la-carte, is when you can actually just go directly from Pleiades. If you see something's wrong when you're mapping it, you can contribute directly to Pleiades by just clicking on the button and say, well, this shouldn't be here, or we should move this. And a-la-carte allows you to actually move a point, get the actual data that you want, and just paste that in Pleiades, and you're good to go.
Right. So after you all give me my credit cards, or your credit cards, one of the things we're going to be doing, we hope to do on Pleiades in the future, is build an API that's going to make it possible for Ryan and anybody else to make suggestions into the Pleiades system without actually having to drive the user to our page. Right? They can work in the a-la-carte environment or your FredMap environment or whatever it is, and use the API to tell us that you have it updated and